Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Ayin Dalid. Yesterday we learned an important baraita that teaches the Tanya. Let's review it. Rabbi Yonatan ben Shaul Omer Rodef Shaya Rodef Achad Chavero LeHorgo. You have a pursuer who's running after a victim because he wants to kill this victim, and you have a third party who sees this. We'll call him the rescuer, and he wants to stop the Rodef. Now here's the thing. The rescuer can, with confidence, stop the pursuer by just maiming him in one of his limbs. And he doesn't have to kill him, right? He's a sharpshooter, and he could just shoot him in the leg and stop him in that way. So then he has to do that. Now let's say he doesn't. Instead of shooting him in the leg, he goes ahead and purposefully shoots him in the head and kills him. In that case, the rescuer is liable to murder neherag alav, because the rescuer could have stopped him. The rescuer's job is to stop this rodef. If the rescuer can do so by just maiming him, then he has to. If there's no other way, if the only way you can stop him is by killing the rodef, then go ahead. You're allowed to. You even have to stop the rodef. He's committing murder. You have to kill him. But if you can just maim him, then you have to do so. That was Rabbi Yonatan ben Shaul's law. We're going to analyze it now. My Tamad Rabbi Yonatan ben Shaul. What is his source? The answer is Dichtib. V'chi yenasu anashim yachdav vegomer. It's from these pesukim in Parashat Mishpatim that says, if two men are fighting, and so let's call them A and B, A throws a punch at B, and he misses, and by mistake, it lands on a pregnant woman, and so now there's two cases. V'yasu'u yeladeha, if it causes her a miscarriage, but lo ya'ason, but no other damage to the mother except for the miscarriage. In that case, he has to pay. He has to pay an amount to the husband of that woman. That's case one. Case two, v'mason yeh v'natata nefesh tachad nafesh. If there is damage to the mother, well, then it depends what the damage is. If the fighter throws a punch and kills the mother, then the fighter gets the death penalty, nefesh tachat nafesh. If it's other things, lesser damage, then you would have to pay whatever the amount is. So that's the two cases. Now we want to analyze, what was the intention of fighter A? When he threw that punch, was it a lethal punch that he intended, or did he intend a light punch and then, oops, it killed someone? Is this beshogeg or bemezid? This murder, when he kills someone, and what did he intend? So let's see. V'amar Rabbi Elazar b'masut shebemita katuv medaber dichtiv v'mason yeh v'natata nefesh tachat nafesh. Rabbi Elazar says it has to be that the fight is to the death. That when he threw that punch, he did it with enough force. His intention was to kill. Fighter A had intention to kill fighter B. How do you know that that's true? Because it says that if in the end it lands on the woman and kills the woman, then he gets the death penalty. Why would he get the death penalty if he didn't even intend to kill anyone? He threw what he thought was a light punch. And let's say it killed B. If he intended to throw a light punch and it killed B, then he would be bishogeg, and he would have to go into ir miklat, exile, but he wouldn't be killed. So he only gets killed if he intended to kill B. Now there is a chidush here, that even though he intended to kill B, but then by mistake he killed someone else, a woman, he still gets the death penalty, because that's the law. If I shoot at someone, I intend to kill that person, but I shoot into a crowd and it misses and kills someone else. Do I say, oh, there was a mistake, I meant to kill this guy, not that guy? No, we don't say that. If you do something that I intend an act of murder, it doesn't matter who I end up killing, that is called murder b'mezid and gets the death penalty. So now we understand that case, that the case is throwing the punch is, he throws a punch intended to kill. All right, now that we know that, let's look at the other case. And nevertheless, in the case where it causes only a damage, it only causes a miscarriage, then he pays. Here's the question. Why does he pay? If Mr. A, when he throws that punch, his intention is to kill B, if so, B has a right of self-defense, right? And B has a right to kill A before A throws the punch at B. Since Mr. A is intending to kill, and B has a right to kill A, A has a death penalty warrant on him. He is like a dead man walking, a dead man punching. And since he is liable to death at that moment, then we should apply kim le bidraba mineh, that he only gets the bigger punishment, which is the death penalty, and he should not have to pay if he causes damage. That's the principle that we saw earlier. So that's the question. Why does he have to pay damages? And even though in the end, B does not act in self-defense, does not kill A, A's totally fine, he's totally alive, we saw that the principle is if at the time that he incurred a fine, a monetary obligation, he was deserving of death, then he doesn't have to pay. So why does he have to pay here? Right? It was important that we established that he was intending to kill, so that we know that B has a right to self-defense to kill A. So that's the question. Now, this is where Rabbi Yonatan comes in. If we agree with Rabbi Yonatan ben Shaul's law that someone who can stop a rescuer, who can stop a pursuer by maiming him, and he cannot kill him. Well, then we can explain this case. We can explain this pasuk. Then it makes sense. When does A have to pay? When A is true. It's true as A that A is throwing a lethal punch, but B has the ability to stop A by maiming him, and therefore B cannot kill A. So A is not liable to death at the time he throws the punch. Since he's not liable to death, he is liable to pay if he causes an injury to the mother. So that makes sense if we follow the Rabbi Yonatan. But if you disagree with Rabbi Yonatan and the Braita, and you say that even someone who can stop a pursuer by maiming him, nevertheless, if he wants to, he can kill him, which is actually what the police generally do now. If you're taking out your gun, the police are trained, shoot to kill, right? Because we're not taking any chances and shooting in the leg or anything like that. So if you say that the law is that once you're allowed to stop a rodef, you can stop him in any way, even by killing him, even though I could stop him by maiming him, I'm allowed to kill him, then where could we find a case where A would have to pay? Because as soon as he throws a punch, and it's a lethal punch, and B, even though B is a sharpshooter and can stop him otherwise, but he is allowed to kill A, so A is liable to death penalty. If he's liable to death penalty, then he doesn't have to pay. And there's no way to explain this pasuk. And so this is the proof for the Bionatan. Okay, pretty brilliant proof. Now we try to reject the proof by saying, maybe this case is different. Maybe you can be liable to two different punishments, death penalty and payment, when the two punishments are given are because of two different people. The death penalty is taken up on himself because he's going to punch, because he's punching the other fighter, Mr. B. So the death penalty is because of B. But the damage that he has to pay, that is liable to the mother. So the payment goes to one party, the liable to death penalty is on account of another person. Since the two punishments are on account of different people, maybe everybody would agree that you don't apply kim le'b'drabamine, but that he gets a death penalty and also payment because they're on account of two different people, and therefore this would not be. So we can explain this pasuk perfectly fine without a biyonatan. But then we answer, no, that's not true. Lo shena, it doesn't matter whether the two punishments are on account of one person or two people. Tamar Rava, rodef shaya rodef achad chavero, v'shibed et hakelim, ben shel nirdaf, ben shel kol adam patur. My tama, bitchayeb benafsho hu. We're going to see a long statement by Rava, but the proof is from this first case. If a rodef is running after a victim to kill him, and while he's doing that, the rodef breaks some vessels. They're in a high-speed chase, and the rodef, the pursuer, he goes and he's driving fast, and he knocks over some things and damages private property and so on. So it doesn't matter whether it's the property of the victim, the nirdaf, or whether it's anybody else's property. Patur, the rodef, does not have to pay. Why? That's kind of surprising. He's causing the damage. My tama mitchayeb benafshohu, because the rodef is liable to death at that moment. Since he's going after someone to kill him, anybody is allowed to take out their gun and shoot the pursuer. So the rodef, his life is already taken away, and because he's liable to the death penalty, he does not have to pay. This is the proof that it doesn't matter, because in this case, he's liable to death on the count of the running after the victim. But he is liable to pay on account of the other people whose garbage cans and lawns he's running over while he's doing the pursuing. So even though he's liable death penalty to one person and money to someone else, nevertheless we do apply kim le'b'd'rabamineh, and he's only liable to death, and he does not have to pay. And even if he survives and no one kills him, still, since at that moment he was liable to death, so he doesn't have to pay. So we see from here that this would not be an answer to explain this Pesukim, but rather the only answer is what Rabbi Yonatan said. So this is in fact a good proof for Rabbi Yonatan. Okay, now that we started learning Rava's statement, he adds two more paragraphs that are also very interesting. ונרדף ששיבר את הכלים של רודף פטור של כל אדם חייב. What if the victim, he's running away, he doesn't want to be killed, and so he's in the car in front trying to get away from the murderer who's trying to kill him, and while he's doing that, he drives on people's lawns and knocks over their property and hits things. So does he have to pay? Well, it depends. If he damages the property of the one pursuing him, he doesn't have to pay. You were trying to kill me, and then to get away from you, I damaged your property. I don't have to pay you for that. But if I damage other people's property who were not involved, then I have to pay. Why? The property of the rodef, I don't have to pay for, the victim doesn't have to pay for, because the money of the rodef should not be more valuable than his body. In other words, if I can kill the rodef and take his life, his own body, then all the more so I could damage his property and don't have to pay him back. That makes sense. But if someone's pursuing me to kill me, and in order to get away from him, I have to go and knock over someone's property, go break into his house, go through the window, whatever I do, that's fine. I'm allowed to do that because I want to save my life. But I have to pay it back. Well, why should that third party suffer a monetary loss just because I was trying to save my life? Okay, good. Okay, you stole my car and crashed it in saving your life. All right, but now pay it back. So he definitely has to pay back. ורודף שהיה רודף אחר רודף להצילו, ושיבר את הכלים, בין של רודף, בין של נדף, בין של כל אדם פטור. Now, if you have someone pursuing the pursuer, in other words, a rescuer. The rescuer, you have a chase here. You have the victim in the first car. You have the murderer in the second car. And then you have a police officer or a rescuer in the third car who's trying to kill the pursuer, which he is allowed to do. It's a mitzvah. So he's doing a mitzvah as a rescuer. And while he's doing that, he bangs into people, things, runs over lawns, and causes that property damage. This happens in every car chase. They never say who actually ends up paying. So here it doesn't matter whether ben sherodeh, ben shenidab, ben shekol adam, whether he damages property of the pursuer or damages property of the victim or any third party. The rescuer does not have to pay anybody. Velo min adin. Now that is not really the letter of the law. He caused damage. Really, he should have to pay. But here's the reason why the rabbis say you don't have to pay. Because if you don't say so, then no one will ever want to be a rescuer. If I know I'm going to go, I'll try to save this guy who's being pursued, and I'll try to do that by killing the rodef. But if I know that in the meantime I'm going to have to be running and doing, and I might miss and all that, I'm going to be personally responsible to pay for any damage. Forget it. I don't want to be responsible for damage. Then I'm not going to bother saving my friend. And then no one's going to want to ever save anybody. And so therefore, this is a rabbinic law that if you're the rescuer, then you don't have to pay. Now, even though there's third-party people that will lose out, that's a different story, so that's too bad for them. But we'd rather that some people suffer some financial loss and that the life of the victim will be saved. Next, we continue with the Mishnah that said, Aval harodef achar behema. If someone's running after an animal to sin with the animal, or to violate Shabbat, or to do avodah zarah, and you see they're about allowed to do any of these sins, and you could stop him by killing him. You're not allowed to kill that person. Rather, you can give a warning, you could be a witness, and take him to court afterwards, and then the court will decide whether or not to give him capital punishment afterwards, but you can't kill him before he sins. It seems that the common denominator is if there's a human victim, then you kill the person, but if there's not a human victim, then he makes the sin, and then you deal with it afterwards. Now, there is also machloket about these items, as we learned in the Braita, Tanya. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai omer, haved avodah zara nitan asilo benafsho. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, avodah zara is a very serious thing, and if you see someone, he's about to go slaughter an animal for idolatry, then you can stop him by killing him. And how does he know that? Mikal vachomer. Uma pegam hediot nitan asilo benafsho, pegam gavoa lo kol sheken. If you're going to cause degradation to another person, meaning a rapist, he's going to cause damage, degradation to the woman who he's raping, and so therefore you're allowed to kill him. If that's true, then all the more so degradation of the honor of God. Isn't that more important? This is not a victimless crime. God is the victim here, and so that should be even worse. And therefore you're allowed to stop someone from idolatry by killing them. Now we ask, V'chi onshin min hadin, kasabar onshin min hadin. Generally, we have a rule that you don't give capital punishment based on the derivation from a kal vachomer. Kal vachomer, maybe it's more, maybe it's less. There's different ways in which everything's more or less. It's based on reason. It's pretty logical, but still, it's based on reason, and you can argue in different ways. So generally, we're not going to give capital punishment based on a kal vachomer. So how could Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai do that? And the answer is he thinks that you can give capital punishment even based on a kal vachomer. Good. Tanya. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Omer Hamchalel et Shabbat Nitan Lasi Lo Benafsho. Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who said that, he goes a step further and says, if you see someone about to violate Shabbat, you can stop him by killing him. You see him, he's about to carry something from inside to outside, then kill him and don't let him do that sin. What's his source? Savar la ke'abu de'amar onshim min hadin ve'atya Shabbat bechilul me'avodah zara. So first of all, he agrees with his father that you can kill someone before they do idolatry to stop them, because he also thinks that you can learn something from a kal vachomer. Same derivation. And furthermore, he has a gezerah shava. It says, Lo techalel shem kodshi, do not let my name be secularized. That's regarding avodah zarah. And it also says chilul regarding Shabbat. And so we learn a gezerah shava, just like you can kill someone before they do idolatry, you're allowed to stop someone from being mechalel Shabbat by killing them. That's his source. Amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yehosadak nimnu vegamru ba'aliyat bet nidze belod kol avirot shebatorah im omrim la'adam avor ve'al tehareg yavol ve'al yehareg chutz me'avodah zarah ve'gilui arayot u'shfichut amim. Up till now we're talking about if you see someone else who's sinning, when can you kill that person to stop them from sinning, and when do you have to let them sin, and then you can testify afterwards. But now we're talking about what if you yourself are challenged and someone comes and says, do this or die. So this is the famous Gemara that has the big three. So Rabbi Yochanan says, name Rabbi Shimon ben Yehosadak, that the sages, when they gather together in the upper story of Nitzeh in Lod, the city of Lod, where the airport is, and often they would get together in the second floor living room of a rich person that the rabbis he would open up their house for the rabbis to come and gather. So the rabbis were there gathered, and they were discussing this subject, and they voted, and they decided the following law regarding all other mitzvot in the Torah. If someone comes and says, do or die, then you do. If someone says, eat pig or die, eat the pig. You don't give up your life for that. Ya'avor, he should transgress and not die, except for three. If he tells you to do idolatry, or to be involved in forbidden sexual relations, or to kill someone, then you have to say, sorry, you have to kill me. I am not going to do these. Avodah zarah law. Now, is this true that for avodah zarah you have to die and not do it? Is it true that you don't do avodah zarah? V'hatanya amar Rabbi Ishmael minayin she'amru lo le'adam avod avodah zarah ve'al tehareg minayin she'avod ve'al yehareg tamud lomar v'chai behem ve'lo she'amut behem. Look at this braita that Rabbi Ishmael teaches. How do you know that if someone comes to you and says, you better bow down to this idol, or else you will die. How do you know that you should bow down and don't die? Because the pasuk says you should live by them, you should live by the Torah and the mitzvot and not die by them. And the Baraita continues, Yachol afilu befaresya. What if it's in public? Talmud Omar velo techaledu et shem kodshi v'nikdashti. The pasuk also says, do not profane my name. You have to make a kiddush Hashem. If it's in public, then Rabbi Ishmael would agree that you have to die and not do avodah zarah. But in private, he says, do the avodah zarah and don't die. So we see that this is in contradiction to the vote that they said over here, that avodah zarah, in all cases, even in private, you should die rather than commit it. So what do we do with this contradiction? And the answer is, Inu da'amur ke'Rabbi Eliezer. These rabbis in Lod, they did not agree with Rabbi Ishmael. Rather, they agreed with Rabbi Eliezer in the following Baraita de Tanya. Rabbi Eliezer omer, V'habta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol lebabecha b'chol nafshecha b'chol me'odecha. You should love Hashem, and loving Hashem is associated with not doing avodah zarah, with all your heart, your soul, and your might. Or might here means the rabbis take to mean your money. Im ne'emar b'chol nafshecha lama ne'emar b'chol me'odecha. V'im ne'emar b'chol me'odecha lama ne'emar b'chol nafshecha. Why does the Torah in this pasuk have to say that you have to love God with all your soul, meaning with your life, and also with your money? Why do you need both? Im yesh lecha adam shegufo chabib alav mimamono lekach te'emar b'chol nafshecha. Yesh lecha adam shemamono chabib alav migufo lekach te'emar b'chol me'odecha. Sometimes you find a person that his body, meaning his life, is more valuable to him than his money. That's most people. Therefore, it says you should love Hashem even with your life, meaning even if you have to give up your life and not do avodah zarah, you have to show your love to Hashem and not and give up your life. So that's how we know that. Now, sometimes you have a person whose money is more valuable than their life. There are such people, right? They'd rather, they're so stingy, they're not going to spend any money on medical care and food. They'd rather die than spend money. So for that person, we say, listen, if someone says, give me $1,000 or worship this idol or give me $1,000, then you have to pay, right? Any money that he asks for, you have to pay and not do avodah zarah. And so we learn from here that avodah zarah is one of the big three, and you have to give up your life rather than do idolatry. So that's what the rabbis were following when they made this vote. Now, the other two we learn as Rabbi Yehuda Nasi did, the Tanya. Rabbi Omer, ki kasher yakum ish al re'ehu ursacho nefesh ken hadabar hazeh v'chi lamadu meroseach. This is a pasuk that we quoted yesterday already that says if a man rapes a na'ara me'orasa, you give him death penalty, but her, you don't do anything to her. Why not? Because she was raped. She's a victim. She's like a victim of murder. You don't blame a victim of murder. Why did you get murdered? So too, we don't blame a victim of rape. That's the simple reading. But now we ask, Melamadu, what do we learn from Doseach? Right now that the Torah itself compared the two laws, we can learn both ways. We're coming to learn something from murder to incest, but we're going to learn also the other way. Since they're back to back, what do we learn? Just like Na'ara Orasa, you can stop the rapist by killing the rapist in order to save her. So too, a murderer, you're allowed to kill the rodef, murderer, in order to save the victim. That's what we saw yesterday. We learned that. And we learned the other way also, just like with murder, if someone asks you to be a murderer, you have to die yourself and not commit murder. So too, if someone says, go and sleep with this Na'ara Me'orasa, then you have to say, no, I won't do it, I'll die, rather than commit this sin. That's what we learned from murder to Na'ara Me'orasa. Good, that's a source for Na'ara Me'orasa. But now we ask, how do you know that in the case of murder itself, that you have to die rather than kill someone else? The answer is Sevarahu. It's reason. You don't need a pasuk for this. It's self-evident. Tahuda ta lekameh de Rabbah, ve'amar le, amar li mari dura'eh, zil And we know what the reason is from a person who came to Rabbah. And he says, I don't know what to do, Rabbi. So these people, these mareh dura'eh, these tough guys, the lord of my place, the governor, the ruler of my place came to me and said, go and kill that person, and if you don't do it, I'm going to kill you. What should I do? And Rabbah answered, Amar le, likteluch vela tiktul. Let them kill you, and you should not kill. Why? Mi yemad damadidach sumaktefe, dilma damadahu gabra sumaktefe. The famous words, who said that your blood is redder than that person? Maybe his blood is redder. Right? How do you compare a life for a life? Is your life more important? Is his life more important? We don't say one life is more important than the other. And so therefore, you want to do what to him what they're going to do to you. So then you're going to live and he's going to die. Well, who are you to decide that he should die and you should live? Rather, no, you can't kill someone else. And even if that means they're going to kill you, so then be killed and don't kill anybody else. Ki ata Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Yochanan, lo shanu ela shelo b'shat hashemad, aval b'shat hashemad afilu misvah kala yahareg ve'al ya'abor. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, he reported in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that this big three, that you die for these three, but all other laws, you violate the law and stay alive. That's only when it's not during a time of persecution, just a regular peaceful time. But if there's a time of persecution and some enemy comes and they want to persecute the Jews and put them down, then even for a minor mitzvah, you have to die and not violate, because you have to put up a protest and say, no, we're not going to be subjugated, and you have to die for even a small thing. Ki ata Ravin amar Rabbi Yochanan, afilu shelo b'shat hashemad, lo amru ela b'sinah, val b'farhesya, afilu misvah kala yehareg v'al ya'abor. And now another stringent opinion, that was for Rav Dimi and Rabbi Yochanan. Ravin has a slightly different opinion named Rabbi Yochanan that's actually more stringent. Over here it says, time of persecution. He says, even if it's not a time of persecution, it's peaceful times, but if there's a difference between private and public. If they tell you in private, go and eat pig or do this some other minor thing, then you should violate and not die. But if it's in public, even if it's peaceful times, if some thug or enemy comes and gathers around 10 people and tells you, eat pig or die, or say lashon hara, or die, whatever it is, some minor thing, afilu misvah kala, you have to die rather than transgress. What an amazing thing. So even just 10 people, because that will still cause a chilul Hashem if there's 10 people there, even if it's not during the time of persecution. My misvah kala, what's an example of a minor mitzvah? Amar Rava bar Yitzchak amarav, afilu leshanuye arketa dimsana, even to change the straps of a sandal. A couple of different interpretations here. One interpretation is these were Roman sandals. Here's an example from a statue. And apparently Jews wore one color and non-Jews wore a different color. So he says, I don't want you to dress distinctively like a Jew. I want you to take off these shoelaces. A small thing, who even notices that? And wear different color shoelaces. And this would be denying his Jewish identity, even though it's a small matter. There's no mitzvah, there's no isur. Nevertheless, you have to protest and say, no, I won't do it. Others say that it means to do avodah, go tie your shoe in front of the idol. So he's not really bowing to the idol, but people looking may think he's bowing to the idol and not realize he's just tying his shoe. So even something that would look like it's a sin, you can't do. And so he asked if it's in public, either or a time persecution according to the first opinion, or in public according to the second version of Rabbi Yochanan, then he has to die rather than violate even this relatively minor law. V'chama paresya, how many people is called public? Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, en paresya pichuta me'asara bnei adam. We don't call it public if there's less than 10 people. 10 people is considered a public. That's also why we have a minyan. A minyan is now a public, so we can make a kiddush Hashem in front of a minyan and say kedusha and say Baruchu. So because of the same reason that to make a Kiddush Hashem, you need 10 people, and also for something to be a Chilul Hashem, it's only if there's 10 people. Pishita Yisraelim ba'inan. Tichtiv v'niktashti betoch b'nei Yisrael. Now it's obvious that these 10 people have to be Jews, because the Pasuk says, I will be sanctified among Bnei Israel. So to be sanctified, you need 10 people, and that would be the same for Chilul Hashem. It won't be true unless it's in front of 10 Jews. But here's the question: what if it's mostly Jews? What if you have 9 Jews and 1 non-Jew? Is that considered public or not? So here's the answer. We have an answer from a Braita that was cited by Rav Yanai, the brother of Rabbi Chia bar Abba. We have a Gezerah Shavah from the word toch that appears in 2 Pesukim. The pasuk that we just quoted says, I'll be sanctified amongst Bnei Israel. It says there regarding Korach va'adato, everybody separate from this Aidah, this congregation. Now the word Aidah, we learned from the spies that Aidah means 10 people, because the spies were 12, and it says Aidah hada'ah, the bad spies, so that was 10 bad spies, because 2 were good. So once we know that spies means 10, Ha'edah means 10 men, 10 Jews, and it says here, mitoch, so mitoch, from amongst, Ha'edah means from amongst 10 Jews. So to toch, regarding Kiddush Hashem, also means 10 Jews. And so that's how I know that you have to have 10 Jews in order for something to be a Kiddush Hashem or a Chilul Hashem. And therefore, that's the answer. If you have 9 Jews and several non-Jews, that's not called public when it comes to Chilul Hashem. It's only Chilul Hashem when it comes to the Jews, which is actually quite interesting. That means that the point of resisting persecution is not to show resistance to the persecutors, but rather to show resistance to other Jews. So they will say, wow, look how devoted this person is, we're going to be devoted too. Whereas violating something, even a relatively minor thing, according to the second opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, if one does so, then that would be a Chilul Hashem. The Chilul Hashem is not what non-Jews think, but rather what other Jews, they'll come away with saying, oh, look at this Chilul Hashem, and they'll feel bad about it. So that's why it's important that it be among 10 Jews. Now we ask, Va Esther Parhes Yahavai. Hold on, Esther, she went and she had relations with Achashverosh. How was she allowed to do that? This is forbidden relations, and this would be in public. Not that everybody was watching them, but everybody knows that they're married, they're going into the bedroom, and what are they doing in there? So Esther, maybe she should have said, sorry, this is a sin, I can't do it, and this Parhes Yah. Now, wouldn't this be included in Gilui Arayot anyway? So even if it was private, there would be a problem. So there's a question about whether Esther was married to Mordechai or not. We have to assume here that she's not married, and therefore it's not adultery. It's not adultery, it's a lesser prohibition of being with a non-Jew. And so this would not fall under official Gilui Arayot, that would be Chayav Mita or Karet, even though prohibited, but it's a lesser prohibition. So therefore, it's if it was in private, that would be okay. She wouldn't have to die. But because it's in public, how come she doesn't die rather than she should die rather than sin, according to either opinion of Rabbi Yochanan? Amar Abaye, Esther karka olam hayta. We're going to see 2 opinions. Abaye answers, Esther was totally passive. She was like the ground. She wasn't doing anything. Because she was passive, she doesn't have to die rather than what? Die rather than do nothing? I'm just sitting here, I'm not doing anything. She's just lying down on the ground, and therefore she doesn't have to die if she's just being passive. You only have to die if you're doing an active mitzvah or active violation of a commandment. Rava Amar Hana'at Asman Shaneh. Rava says, you only have to die if the persecutor is telling you to violate a law as a means of persecution, to put down the Jewish religion. However, if they're telling you to violate something because they get personal benefit from it, that's a different story. And here, Achashverosh wasn't sleeping with Esther in order to give religious persecution to her, knowing that she's Jewish and therefore he's going to sleep with her. In fact, he didn't even know that she was Jewish. So he's saying, sleep with me because he gets pleasure out of it. So when a persecutor gets pleasure out of it, then you don't have to die, because it's not religious persecution. Di la temachi ha hane kevake v'dimonike hechi yahabinan lehu ela natasman shane hachaname ha naat asman shane. And Rava says there's a proof to this because he's living in Persia and they have these shovels, these coal shovels that the Persian priests, they would come and take people's coal shovels and use them to fill the coals in there that they needed for their temple. And they would come and take them from the Jews also. So how do we give them these coal shovels? We're donating and helping these pagan temples. We're assisting in Avodah Zarah. Maybe we should say no. And even if they would kill us, we would say no, we can't participate in Avodah Zarah. But we don't say that. We give them the coal shovels. How do we do that? I know why, because they're asking us for the coal shovels, and they're asking everybody. This is not a means of religious persecution. It's just like a tax. They're doing it for their own benefit. They benefit from it. So then we're allowed to give it to them. And so that's the same thing here with Esther. She was sinning. She was violating. It's true, but he was asking her for his own benefit, not as religious persecution. So the context makes all the difference. And we see Rava is consistent with his opinion because he says, Damar Rava, Nochri damar le'la Yisrael ketol aspasta b'shabeta ushte lechevata v'ila katel nalach liktil v'la liktele. He says, if a non-Jew comes to a Jew on Shabbat and he says, cut this grass and on Shabbat and feed it to the animals. And if not, I'll kill you. In that case, he should cut the grass and feed it to the animals and not die. However, if he says, shedele nahara liktele vela liktil, if the non-Jew says, pluck this grass and throw it into the river and not even use it, then he should die rather than violate and cut. Because in the second case, what's his purpose in telling the Jew to cut grass? He wants him to violate his own religion. In that case, even though it's not one of the big three, you have to die. Rather than do it. I suppose it would be in public. So we see this fundamental difference. If he says, violate Shabbat to feed the animals, that means he's benefiting from it. So if a non-Jew comes, even if he's a Nazi, even if he's a persecutor, and he says, I want you to cook eggs for me on Shabbat, because he's hungry, then you violate Shabbat. He's only doing it because he's hungry. However, if he says to violate Shabbat, he doesn't need it. He just wants you to violate Shabbat, then that's religious persecution, and one has to die rather than sin. Last question, to be ameh. Ben noch mesuvel kedushat Hashem or en mesuvel kedushat Hashem. Are non-Jews also obligated on kiddush Hashem? Meaning, if someone tells a non-Jew, do idolatry or die, do they also have to die, or should they do idolatry? Right? We know that non-Jews also cannot serve idolatry. That's one of the Shem Mitzvot Ben Noach. But are they obligated to that level that also they have to not do a Kiddush Hashem and die, rather than violate if they're being persecuted? Amar Abaye Tashema, Sheva Mitzvot Nistavu B'nei Noach, V'im Ita Temaneh Havyan. Abaye says, I have a simple answer. We know in the Braita says that B'nei Noach were commanded 7 commandments, and if they were also commanded regarding Kiddush Hashem, then that would be 8. So obviously, they're not commanded on Kiddush Hashem. They can't do idolatry willingly, but if they're forced to with their life, then they can do idolatry and save their life. The law, the requirements for a Jew and non-Jew are different. Rava says that's not a proof. When it says 7 mitzvot, it means 7 and everything that's associated with it. So the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem is built in. It's one of the details. It's part of not doing avodah zarah. Don't do avodah zarah. And part of that law is, and if someone forces you to against your life, then give up your life. And so it can still be counted as 7. So we don't have an answer. So what is the answer? Amar Rav Ada bar Ava Amri be'Rav Ketiv ladavar hazeh yislach Hashem la'abdecha bebo Adoni bet rimon lishtachavot shama v'hu nish'an al yadi v'hishtachaveti yuchtiv v'yomer lo lech leshalom. This is a story of Naaman, the commander of the army of Aram. And he was an idolater. And one time he had sara'at. And he says, what am I going to do? And Elisha helps him out. He says, go dunk in the Jordan River. And he gets better. And Naaman makes teshubah. He says, I'm going to serve Hashem only. I'm not going to do avodah zarah. Great. But he asks Elisha a question. I need a pardon for the following thing. Because my master, the king of Aram, he goes to the house of Rimon and he bows there to the idol. I don't want to bow, but he has to lean on me because he's old, he's frail. And when he leans, I have to also bend down in order to lean with him. Now, I have no intention to do avodah zarah. hara. But if I don't go with him and help him, he'll kill me. What should I do? And Elisha says, Lech leshalom. He gives him a heter. You're permitted to go and bow to the idol because you're only doing it for the king and you yourself don't want to. So this is a proof. Im ita lale male. If the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem applies to non-Jews, then Elisha should have said, sorry, this is one of the big three, you have to die rather than serve idolatry, right? He should have told them that. And therefore we can learn that non-Jews are not obligated to give up their lives for idolatry. They are not commanded in Kiddush Hashem. So is this a good proof? Not necessarily. Ha b'sin'ah, ha b'farhesiyah. He was only doing this in private. The king didn't go bow down in public. He went in the little temple, and there weren't other Jews around. Remember, it has to be 10 Jews in order for it to be parhesiyah. And so there weren't other people around. And so because it was in private, that's why Elisha said, okay, it's permitted. If it was in public, and it would have been a chilul Hashem, then it would have been a violation of Kiddush Hashem. And then maybe Elisha would say, no, sorry, you can't do it. So actually, there's no final answer from this, even though we followed up. We need an answer. But in the end, we have a proof. It sounds like a pretty good proof. But in the end, it could be otherwise. Rambam, in fact, gives a halacha l'maaseh that a ben Noach, if he's forced to violate his commandments, even if it's idolatry, then he's permitted to transgress. And so we follow the main proof here, even though the proof is not 100% because it was in private, but it still sounds like that is a pretty convincing proof. And so that's the halacha according to Rambam, that non-Jews are not commanded in Kiddush Hashem. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.